Welcome to the Winners Table, where the conversation is different when you sit with the winners. I'm your host, Amber Wright, and today I am joined by Freddie Taylor of Urban Intellectuals, Jeannine Brown of Everyday Lead, and Angela Hawkins of Bamboo. Our topic today is on generational wealth. It's always a good one. It's always an interesting topic to discuss, and I can't wait to hear what your perspectives are on generational wealth. So I'm going to start by asking you, what does generational wealth mean to you?
It's a deep question, right? But I believe that generational wealth means to me attaining enough assets and capital that sustains your family beyond not only your lifetime, but lifetimes beyond that.
Money in your family line that you won't see spent. Come on, somebody. Yes, I love that. How about you, Jeannine?
I think it's an avenue to create financial freedom for generations to come, right, with appreciable assets, right? Because some people got stuff, it's just not worth anything. So I think through that, and that can continue to grow, right? So you want this wealth, monies, these finances to continue to grow while you're doing other things.
Okay. How about you, Angela?
Very similar understanding of generational wealth, making sure that you build a foundation for which the generations after you can continue to contribute to in order to make sure that your family legacy is wealthy, well beyond your time here.
Absolutely. Thank you. And my sentiment is the same. That's what we kind of understand it to be without being a financial person per se. That is what I understand generational wealth to be too. There's a difference between being rich and wealthy. But I want us to have a more specific conversation about the generational wealth gap. Yeah. So we know that we have had a 400-year stall. Maybe we can call it that, hindrance, oppression that has kept us from being able to correct. It's a long list of adjectives. Yeah, I wanted to frame it from our perspective versus theirs, but we've been at a disadvantage, a severe disadvantage as it relates to building generational wealth, which has created a wealth gap. So in your opinion, can the wealth gap be closed? Why or why not? We'll start with you, Angela.
Can it be closed? That is a loaded question. And I think when you ask, can it be closed, you're asking, can it be closed to where others are, other races are in the race towards wealth? I think we have a long way to go. We have a very long way to go. And unfortunately, when we think about wealth, and we're not talking about riches, we're not talking about money or cash, we're talking about wealth. A lot of wealth had started, when the country started. People brought wealth with them over to this country. But then you look at, in some of the Black neighborhoods where they were building that wealth, they were building with real estate and businesses and things like that. And a lot of that was robbed from them. So that people had to start over. I think what came with that, it wasn't just that they no longer had this asset. It was that now they had a very scarred perception of what happens when you build that asset. So for generations, people just thought, well, I'm going to spend it because I ain't going to be able to take it with me. So I'm going to spend it. And what happens there is that you have nothing to hand down to the next generation. So I remember having a conversation specifically, and the person told me, well, I give my kids education. That's what their inheritance is education. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just gonna, I'm gonna buy what I can buy now and spend it now. And I said, what you're doing is you're kicking out that foundation and you're telling them start over. And you don't see that in other cultures. Mm-hmm. You see that foundation is built and it stays, and then they come in, and you don't expect that child is gonna come in with nothing. That child does have the education, that child does have the know-how in order to sustain and perpetuate what you've built, but you have to build something. Mm-hmm. And I think that until we get to that point where it's understood that we have a responsibility to build that foundation, I think that we're going to have a harder time trying to close that gap.
Wow. Snaps. Yeah. It's deep. Yeah. It's deep. What about you, Jeannine?
I think we need to reimagine what generational wealth is and can be through an education, right? Through educating people. I think sometimes I feel like we generalize so many different things. A lot of people in this country don't have generational wealth across race lines.
Okay.
Right? That's why we call it the 1%, the top 5%. I think we have to reimagine how that looks and how we obtain it. But the only way we can do that is if we have to get away from this consumer mindset. So can it be closed? Yes, I believe it can be. But in order for that to happen, what we spend on, we got to stop spending, right, and start investing more, right? And that might look different for a lot of people. I used to own rental properties. I hated being a landlord. Do I still think that there's significant wealth in ownership? Yes, and that was proven back at during the Reconstruction, that when Black people moved out of sharecropping and were freed through slavery, land was given to slave owners that did not own it. So we know that the earth is rich, right? Not just in minerals and all of these things. We know that that is rich. So I do believe that is a way, but I think in order for us to close it, we really have to reimagine what that looks like, where we are investing our money, and how we get that money to grow, and teaching. Right, it needs to be the first thing we teach. We teach children how to wash dishes and do laundry. We need to teach them how to invest in the laundry detergent and the washing machines, right? So I think that's how I think it can be closed.
That's good. What I appreciate about that sentiment is it perpetuates the idea of generational wealth, because it's one thing to say, I made all this money that I'm leaving to my children, but if they don't know what to do,
Don't know how to spend, right?
Exactly.
That's
They
my
have a
fear.
responsibility.
That is my biggest fear, right? I don't have children that I've birthed of my own, but the beneficiaries of my wealth is my niece and nephew, and I actually have someone who is going to manage my estate, because I love her, y'all.
I'd say the same.
But I don't know if I trust her to manage the money the way it should be. But then I have to think, I need to teach her. We need to teach her a little bit more. Yeah.
I don't believe the wealth gap can be closed.
Okay.
Not as
We can always count on Freddie to be the dissenter.
yeah.
Antagonist.
Well, I mean, but let's just tell the truth. I mean, a 400-year head start. Give me a 400-year head start. You'll never catch me. I don't care what you do. Particularly if I own and control the system of which that you're working under.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're never going to catch up. We're not going to catch up until there's been reparations paid for the debt that's owed. Now, if that's redistribution of wealth. Yeah, exactly.
No, you're not redistribution. You're giving me back the wealth that you stole.
You are a plus interest, plus interest, right, over time. But yeah, damn right. Yeah, this is the only way that we're going to have any movement in that wealth gap.
Freddie, I've never seen you so passionate.
Yeah, I get fired up over this. Yeah, I mean, but it's so serious because we are so crippled and behind. We don't have we talk about entrepreneurship all the time. Who funding these entrepreneurs?
Correct.
People with angel investors fund people that look like them. Yeah. Where are angel investors? We ain't got none because we ain't got no money. Yeah. So we can't. It's hard to generate wealth when you don't have nothing to start with, right? Yeah. And speaking of reparations, this is the foul thing about this country. Yeah, I am fired up.
Yeah. Let's run it.
But reparations was paid for slavery.
It was.
They paid the slave owners. They paid them per slave that was freed.
And gave them land.
Come on. So here we go with the system. Yeah. So they control the system, and it always ends. We always end up getting the short end. It's designed for us to lose.
Just imagine how profitable your
we're gonna have to do something
could be if you didn't have to pay the employees who worked.
If you didn't have to bootstrap just to be able to get things done.
Right. And I think that's what gets people fired up about this country, and about this topic, is that when you start talking about reparations, if you talk about it from an informed standpoint like Freddie is, you also recognize there are a lot of other ethnicities who were paid reparations. The Japanese got funding for being in camps. I mean, I'm sure it's in those flashcards, right? Right. All of these folks got it. Even Jews got reparations in this country, and what happened to them didn't even happen on this soil. And they still get, so I think that is the biggest challenge, is figuring that out. But even beyond that is, in order for it to do it, and I do love the current movement that is happening in the culture around educating people, right? We have so many groups out there, men and women, who have taken it upon themselves to really spend this time to teach what has not been taught before.
Freddie?
And I think, and teaching how to invest, understanding what money really is, like the basics of what we've been talking about. And I think that, again, we know that education is power. And so now I think we're creating that race toward closing that wealth. Now we just got to manage that with the consumer spend.
Well, let me ask you then, what was the impetus for your learning? Was it someone who sat down and talked? So also, let me walk it back for a second. Are you all actively in pursuit of generational wealth?
Absolutely.
Is this a firm yes from everyone at the table?
Yes, but I will say it's always an interesting topic of conversation for me because, like Jeannine, I don't have children. So I always think, okay, if I'm building generational wealth, what generation, like who is that in that generation? Okay. But I think from the same token, you know, I have nieces and nephews, none of which have proven to me that they would be able to build on my legacy. But I feel like there's an opportunity for me, even though, you know,
Niece and nephew, I promise she loves you.
I do, and I'll buy you whatever you want. I buy you.
You'll have a whole host of new nieces and nephews.
Right.
You can reach Angela at.
Are you in search of a rich auntie?
Right. No, look, I have talked about adopting a grown-up. I'm serious. But I feel like there's an opportunity for me to educate. Because the wealth is going to go somewhere. I'm not building. I'm earning to spend. I'm earning and I'm investing and things like that. But when my time is up and I go to better places, I need to feel as though it is worth something. So I think for me, educating. Just educating, looking, like you said, looking out for opportunities to educate our brown and black boys so that they can understand what it means to be, like people talk about, auntie left or uncle or grandpa left, such and such, and they think, oh, I got money, I can go burn this, or even I can use it, to go to school. But if you really look at what was the purpose of you being left that money, let's talk about that. I mean, it's not just about teaching them how to have a bank account. It's not just about teaching them how to save for a car or a house, but it's really teaching them what investments to make with things like an inheritance.
And to Jeannine's point about education, that conversation can't start when you die.
Right. Yeah.
It has to be happening in real time.
To remove the taboo about talking about money.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? We don't spend enough time, even with people that work. You don't want to tell nobody how much money you make. Well, how do you know if you're underpaid? Right? So I think we have to remove this taboo, even in our families, around talking about money, the importance, the value of it, how much do you have, so that I can help you, right, along this journey. You'll find out people die broke and you thought they were living well. Right. Because they might have been living well, but they didn't have anything. You find out they had no money in their savings accounts upon death. They had no life insurance and they didn't even understand the value of it. Or they didn't have enough life insurance to even bury them. And so now we're asking the community to go fund a funeral. Right. So I think when we can remove that taboo, related to talking about money. And I don't know who started that. You don't tell nobody what you make. You don't tell anybody.
Well, employers perpetuate that because they don't want it.
But that's like a black community stigma.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell nobody, you don't nobody in your business.
Don't tell nobody in your business.
Yeah. But it's such a powerful tool to have that information.
Yeah. Okay, but wait. Let's talk about that a little further.
Okay.
Because what if you're the only one who's on the path that you're on in your business or in your family? How do you facilitate that conversation? Are you the only entrepreneur in your business? I mean, in your family?
No.
No? You?
Yes.
You?
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm sorry. Okay. I lied. But I will say that I'm probably the most successful. Okay. I have a lot of, cousins and things that are building, but one thing I don't talk to them about money, but I think it's shame on my part because it's more of a preservation thing for me. I don't want to, for them to say, okay, well, so, you're making that much money. Yeah, you're making, I mean, not that I'm making a bunch of money, but they don't, they're not educated on cash flow right now. They're not educated on the net profit of the business. So, I owe them some things, I think.
Okay. What were you going to say a second ago?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about kind of how we're going to close that gap? Like, because I said no, right? But under this particular system, we got to start thinking globally. Like, if you want to have a chance, like, we need to be investing in the jewel of the world, Africa, right? So I read a study that said over the next 30 years, 300 million middle-class Africans are going to be raised out of poverty. Now, to put that in context, 30 million middle-class Americans were created during the Industrial Revolution. So 10 times what happened here in America is happening right now in Africa. And we are sitting here watching. So I think if we're going to get serious about closing that gap, we got to get serious about investing internationally, building our relationships with the continent and the people on the continent, and retying our intelligence and our access to opportunity in with their resources and human capital.
There's a whole paradigm shift around thinking is what you're talking about, right? Because there's so much wealth in ideas. And so I think we have to learn how to think bigger and more globally, like you're saying, Freddie. But how do we get there? How do we get people to do that? Because there's still all of this stigma around the unknown, and people don't trust.
Yeah, this must be my episode, and I get fired up over all of this. But inside of the Black Math Genius program that we have, right, we're attacking the wealth gap in a very specific way. We are going to children and working on their mathematical skills at an early age, because what we found is as children progress through school, our children, Black children, progress through school, they fall behind the mathematical chart. And once you fall behind in mathematics, think about what you lose. If you don't get algebra and calculus at a certain grade, you're not going to be an engineer. You're not going to be a doctor. You're not going to be a software developer. You're not going to be any of these high-paying jobs that we need in order to have capital to invest. So what's the solution? We got to get to the children now, and get them out of this. Like, our performance in education is pathetic. It's really alarming when you start looking at the numbers across the board. We got to do something different. What we're doing currently as a people in this country is not working. It's working for a small bit of us, right, who are doing okay. But what about the rest of the people?
The systems, right? So you got the systemic sort of issues around education. So my niece is a math educator. She was told in the 6th grade that she was not going to be good at math. Right, so we got to really protect our kids and what's happening to them in the system itself, right? But now she's a math educator. She literally teaches children mathematics. Right, and if you go back, and you can speak to this, I'm sure better than I can, that math was our jam. That was our thing, right? We were the ones that built all the systems around mathematics. And how has that been stripped away from us?
We allow other people to educate our children, and they are educating the populace based on their children to make them excited, make them feel good. So inside the Black Math Genius program, we specifically meld history with mathematics. And we tell little Black boys and little Black girls, this is your science. This came from you. The Greeks did not invent mathematics. They sat at the feet of the Africans and learned mathematics, right? So we tell you, it's amazing when you tell little Black boys and little Black girls this, the interest level shoots through the roof. It's crazy.
And so just like this, so just like this topic on generational wealth, we buy into the lies. Black people aren't good at math. Black people will not have wealth. We spend too much. We don't know how to invest.
So worried about labels and this, that, and the other
and all of those things. And I think sometimes it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's why I'm like, yes, we can close this gap. We have the tools. We have the intellect and the technology to do it.
We just have to tap into it. And that's what I love about where this conversation has blossomed into, because you can walk into this discussion to say, well, who has generational wealth, who doesn't, who's on the path to achieving it, and who isn't. But I really love that we're touching on the fact that there's nuance to this. There's so many inroads that lead to accomplishing this goal. And it's not just, putting bands to our ear on Instagram. There's so much more that goes into the conversation. And when we talk about actual generations and we think about children, whether we birth them or we don't, there is a generation of people that are coming up behind us. And what are we leaving for them? What are the lessons that we are teaching them? And what are we talking to them about as it relates to money, specifically.
And I think that what it says is that regardless of anything else, regardless if you don't have wealth to pass down to your children, the most important thing is the education on how to get there.
Yeah. So how do we educate each other? Because I think it resonated with me what you said about the 6th grade. Was it your niece? Mm-hmm. For me, it was 3rd grade. The teacher didn't say that I wasn't good at math, but she called to tell my mom that I was struggling with my multiplication tables. And I internalized that to mean that I was not good at math. Yeah. And it's now all these many years later where I'm still like, counting on my fingers sometimes. And then, or if I can think of a math problem quickly, it's like, oh, I do know math. Because there's still that 3rd grader inside of me who was made to believe or internalize this idea that I wasn't good at math. But girl, you can't be no entrepreneur if you can't add, okay? So I've definitely learned to overcome that. But there are folks, my point in saying all that is there are grown people who don't have strategies, who don't have information. And we're fortunate to be a part of the TSP community to where we can come and have these types of really rich and robust discussions about generational wealth that goes beyond, well, I don't even got $20. You know, we can have a more layered discussion about that. But what do you think needs to happen in terms of the Black community at large? How do we ignite the same type of passion or even a little bit of interest in the way that you have about thinking globally, about thinking beyond what happens on our block here in America?
I think we all owe it to our communities to give back. We all owe it to our communities to have some type of responsibility to go back and talk whenever we can. Mm-hmm. I mean, like I said, I don't have children, so it always has been to me, well, you know, generational gap starts with me. Yeah. but the reality is, I still broke the mold. Yeah. I did, but I think when I think about it, I still have a responsibility globally. Mm-hmm. I have a responsibility, and no, I can't tackle the world, but I can do my part. And I can provide education where I can, and I can provide, some opportunity to confidence build, and that can come from my business. I can use my business as a platform to reach into a philanthropic arm that's going to reach into the community and do what I can.
Yeah, because for me, some people wrestle with the term give back because it's like, well, I didn't take. Mm-hmm. So what am I giving? What am I giving back if I didn't take? There was nothing handed to me. So I love the idea of we all have the ability to give to.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You can give to causes, initiatives, organizations. You can invest in the Black Math Genius. Like there's all these opportunities because maybe that's not meant for you to do, to lead a program of such kind. But I want to invest still in this next generation of children, of specifically Black little boys and girls, to help them grow in their knowledge and their awareness. What about you?
I just think we have to just really think about this thing, right? I recognize that I had a lot of blind spots around other people's experiences related to money, right? So I grew up in a family where we weren't like rich by any means, but everybody worked. And my grandfather was really always talking to us about how we spend our money, what we invest our time in, not getting credit cards, right? So that was more about, we don't want you to go into deep debt that you can't pay it off. And so, but then understanding how to use credit, or how to use it to my advantage, realizing that credit is somebody else's money. Having good credit gets you to borrow money cheaper, right? So those sorts of things. But so many people don't have that. Right? They've never had that conversation. They don't know the difference between a credit card and a debit card. They don't know how to use money at all. And so I think we have to figure that out without shaming people around it. Because sometimes I recognize even in myself that I can sound like I'm shaming you because you bought that big Louis Vuitton bag. And I'm like, that bag costs $3,000. Like, do you have $3,000 in the bag? Right. So I have to even down myself.
Thank you for acknowledging that, though, because everybody carries prejudices, but
so I have to acknowledge that. So I think for me is like moving out of the space of judgment, and then finding ways where I can serve the community in this way. Even if I'm not delivering the content, say, hey, there's a conference coming up, you should go. And so I have been really intentional about making sure my nieces and my nephew they understand that Auntie has a business, your dad has a business. We would love for you all to do something. You might not, our business might be sold or go away, but we want you to see that you can have freedom in this and figure out how to do that. And if it's not you, it's your children. So any wealth that I create is part of the family wealth. The Browns are creating this as a legacy of the Joneses.
Meet the Browns.
Yes. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Well, no, I'm joking, but I'm not though, because I really love that. There's a gentleman named Rob Fairley who's a researcher, and he's done a lot of research on economics, specifically in the Black community. And a study that I read of his said that Black entrepreneurship is hindered by the fact that there is a lack of intergenerational wealth, and that there's no family business to inherit. So that you can't talk to your aunt who had a business, or your Uncle Freddie, or whomever, because there's no one around that does that, which is why I was asking earlier, are you the only one in your family? My dad's an entrepreneur, but wasn't really taught the inroads of what that means. So I can recognize that might be where I get my work ethic from. I don't know anything about building a business. It's all on the job training. And that's part of it too, and we understand that. But there is something to be said about my Aunt Jeannine, who I saw go and travel the literal world and sell services to corporations and business. Like my auntie did that. And she talked to me about how she did that. And she said it was possible for me too. And I think that's beautiful, because that is part of I think what can lead to building generational wealth, because it's igniting in the people behind us the idea that there's so much more possible for you.
Yeah, because if you can walk away from your business with money to even be seed money to someone in the family, right? So my niece might not ever want to do organizational development training like my firm does. She may never want to be an executive coach. But she might want to start something else, and I want to be able to walk her through that and say, this is what's possible for you. Right? This is something that you can do, and you can create this for your children. And that's, I think, inspirational. And I hear that from her occasionally, like, Auntie, I'm on my path. I'm going to get there. She wants to open up a school. I want to invest in that school. You know, and so and that's what we talk about on the phone, and we joke and we play, but I think sometimes we have to narrow in those conversations, and we have to have the conversations that they don't know how to initiate.
I really love that, Jeannine, because I do think that we have to also be intentional about having those conversations, and so I wanted to know what you thought.
Yeah, and when we were talking about your niece, we have to allow our young people to dream, right? It's almost like we try to put them in a box. You need to do this, you need to do that. No, that's what you did. That was great for you, but they have different goals and aspirations, and that creative energy and juice that they bring to the world needs to come out through them, through their eyes, through their vision. It's okay to trust the children, right? I think our future is in good hands.
I believe the children are our future. Exactly. Teach them well and let them lead the way.
And Angela's mentioned college several times, and we are college graduates, and I don't want to disparage higher education, but I actually think college is the biggest, what's the word I want to use? Like the biggest challenge we have around generational wealth too, right? You got folks going to college and not getting ROI in the 5 years of that degree and still paying off loans till death. That's the till death do you part kind of thing that I think is a big challenge to generational wealth too, that we force people in that.
As a former educator, in higher ed, I think that also comes down to knowledge and education. When I was teaching, I would tell my students, I know some of you all don't want to be here. You might want to run a t-shirt business, but let me tell you something. You're not just going to leave college with a piece of paper. You're also going to leave with social capital. You're going to need somebody to run your books. You're going to need an accountant. So Tim, who's an accounting major, you might want to connect with him in one of these group projects, and kind of framing it for them in a way to where they can see a greater and a deeper value in what they can get out of the collegiate experience.
But I think that what we also don't recognize in a lot of, because we don't have that history of running businesses and things like that, sending that child to college is giving them the foundation that they would need to go and do that. But if we are building these businesses, sometimes they could look at that business as their education, and that business could give them the foundation that they need to be, if what they want to do is run that business.
This has been a fantastic conversation, though, about generational wealth and the gap, and whether or not we can close it. And I appreciate and respect all of you for doing what you can to contribute to that cause. Thanks for joining us on the Winner's Table. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.
home for conversations on Black entrepreneurship and wealth, available on your favorite platforms.